Right, Chris, we've been going for quite a while, but let's talk about some bonus clip content.
Clips.
And this one's actually also relevant to UK hockey, which you reminded me of. So I'm just going to read this tweet.
I saw it coming through Twitter.
Yeah, so I will read this tweet because Chris reminded me of this event, and then I'll pass it to Chris because this was his idea and I want him to be able to explain his thing. So the Black and Gold Wire posted a tweet earlier today saying, on this day in 2001, all hell broke loose in the Battle of Lower Parliament Street, the infamous bench-clearing brawl between the Panthers, the Nottingham Panthers and the Sheffield Steelers. A record-breaking 471 penalty minutes were handed out as a result. And they've obviously linked a YouTube link there. So go and check out at Black Gold Wire on Twitter if you want to check out the bench clearing brawl for yourself. 471 penalty minutes. That's a lot there, ladies and gents. So a lot of stuff going on there. So Chris, why did you want me to bring this up on the podcast today?
I brought it up because obviously it's relevant being the 20th anniversary. And see, we have mentioned in the past, when we had Caitlin Berry on, we spoke about, they were talking about potentially not doing hits and stuff for COVID reasons in the Canadian junior system. And then we had Chris Ellis on, and I said how, the one thing I kind of have never seen live in ice hockey is a bench clearing brawl. And he said, yeah, you probably won't now.
Yeah.
Because, that sort of thing just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
So I was there thinking, kind of what has kind of, how is hockey developing either away from fighting or in fighting? Like you show a clip to people who aren't interested in hockey and they just don't understand why two people are allowed to just punch each other and it's part of the game. So you kind of looking and having a bit of a discussion about kind of, where can you see it going in the future and is there still a place for it? I know we've covered it in a little bit of detail in the past, and that's why I kind of thought it'd be a bonus clip rather than a main clip, because it means we keep it kind of short and concise, so to speak.
We hope so anyway.
Well, we hope so anyway. But I was just thinking, are we ever, you often, you sometimes see line brawls and stuff, but, bench clearing brawls mean something, really big has to happen for a bench clearing brawl for the benches to go. And I do sometimes kind of, lay awake at night, just kind of starting to drift off to sleep and start dreaming about me being at an arena, calling a game, and just being able to go, oh my word, the benches have gone, and just commentating on just utter carnage that's just sprawled out in front of me. So I'm kind of interested to get your thoughts on kind of bench clearing brawls and fighting in general, because the thing I find interesting, and I was listening to some people talking about it. In fact, they were interviewing a player that was on the ice, and I think the thing with a bench clearing brawl is, obviously, you get people that are interested in fighting, but then all the players come off, and there are people that aren't. And I found it interesting, and you can note it when you look at the videos.
Yeah,
is that yes, okay, everybody's there and everybody's grabbing each other, but half of the people, on your team who are fighters and who aren't, and on the other team who's fighters and who aren't.
Yeah,
and what you tend to find is that people from opposing sides who aren't fighters will go and grab each other so that they're kind of locked up, so that you don't end up with a non-fighter getting the lights beaten out of them by a fighter. Well, and the fighters go with each other, and the non-fighters just grab each other and stand to the side.
It's a combination of they will go and grab somebody, but they don't want to fight them, so there isn't two players going at one of your player. Because you never know, just because they're known for not being a fighter doesn't mean they might decide to drop the gloves one day. But if then you approach them as a non-fighter and you're like, look, we really don't need to do this. This isn't our fight. We know we're both not fighters here. Let's just hug it out and do a little dance together and then that'll be it. Push and shove a little bit, but other than that, it's okay.
Yeah, push and shove a bit and, do a few pirouettes on the ice.
Exactly. And it's like you mentioned earlier on, people that see, if people that don't watch hockey, if you show them a hockey fight, they're either confused, repulsed, or so excited to watch more. It's one of the three. It's always one of three. It's some people are always oh my, that's terrible. They shouldn't do that. Other people really? They do that. And other people show me another one. So in terms of whether fighting still has a place in hockey, I think it does. I think it does still have a place in hockey. I feel like the biggest argument as to why fighting shouldn't be allowed in hockey is injuries nowadays and kind of the seriousness that concussions are being considered. Now, obviously, that's certainly up for debate. I've never played hockey. I've never been a pro hockey player. I've never been in a hockey fight. So take my word for what you want. If you want
He's
to,
been in plenty of street fights.
oh yeah, all the time, throwing knuckles all the time. Yeah, me. And I feel like I don't know if Chris, if you've watched the documentary Ice Guardians. It's on Netflix, I believe.
Yes,
it's a really good one. They interview fighters on there and they talk about like their fighting careers and kind of their thoughts on fighting in the game now. I feel like, first of all, it's the player's choice to to start a fight. No play. Yeah, there are certain examples where a player might get jumped, but it might be, usually it's because they've done something that's warranted them to have to answer the call and drop the gloves, you know?
Yeah, there is that.
I feel like a lot of these athletes, like Brian McGrattan is in the documentary, for example, and he was just one of those guys that just really liked fighting. You know, like he enjoyed it. Like it's either like they know like there's several different reasons why players became enforcers back in the day. It's because they weren't necessarily that good at hockey, and it was their ticket to the bigs. Like think about it this way: you're a fringe NHL player in the 80s or 90s, 70s, 80s, 90s, something like that. You know you're not the best skater, you're not the best shooter, you're not the best passer, but the only way you get kept in the lineup and get to earn a decent wage playing the sport you love is by dropping the gloves every night. Now, that does take a toll on somebody, and that takes a toll on, you know, their physical and potentially their mental health as well, but, you know, it's a chance that they might never get back, and if they're willing to do that, I think you've got to let them do it, you know? Like, if nobody's forcing them to do that, but then again, they've got to deal with the consequences of, okay, well, if I don't fight, I might not be in the NHL anymore. I might end up in the AHL for the rest of my career, but at least I can do it on my own terms, perhaps, if they don't necessarily agree. So, you know, like there's consequences and just like results from any actions you take. But the one point I want to make regarding the biggest point from the Ice Guardians documentary is that most of them said, like, I never got a concussion while fighting. They'd all say, the time that I either got a concussion or got any symptoms from concussions were from the most lackadaisical hit against the boards. Or like they'd collided with somebody and they'd made contact against the glass and their head had flipped back a little bit too much and then they felt concussion symptoms. Like most of them say, yeah, you get like the injuries on your hands, you get like the bruising on your face, and it's not the most ideal thing, especially if you're coming up against a team with like one of the best fighters in the game ever, you know, like a Bob Probert or something like that, a Ty Domi, a Chris Knuckles Nyland kind of guy. If you're coming at, like, a lot of them talk about how they'd like lay awake at night that night before they'd have to play some of those guys, and they knew they'd have to fight them at some point, and they knew that they could get like their ass handed to them essentially. But at the end of the day, they didn't suffer any crazy injuries from that. It was more the freak plays against the boards or fighting for a puck and a high stick goes to their face. That's where most of the injuries came, because there's also the code in fighting as well. So Chris, what are your thoughts on that? And kind of like, because obviously you asked me, what are your thoughts on kind of where fighting belongs now? I've rambled obviously, but go for it.
Yeah, I think there's a place for it. We've seen, you know, it's momentum, it's all that sort of stuff. It's law enforcement when something happens that shouldn't have happened. I think one thing I find interesting, and it's what you said there, and it was in the Ice Guardians documentary, is that you get injured, and it's the same with anything. When you have to go in 100%, because if you go in 50%, that's when you get injured.
Yep.
If you don't put everything into it, and I think in a fighting situation, you're putting everything into it.
Yes.
Whereas when you have a hit against the boards or something, or a high stick when you're not expecting it, that's the injury.
Yep.
The other thing I'll say is that if you listen to or watch on YouTube like the NHL fights when the players are mic'd up, it's very, very rarely coming like unexpectedly.
Yes.
Like half the time it's after a hit, and then the player goes, okay, well that's a bad hit. I know I'm going to have to deal with some stuff now.
Yep.
The other half of the time, it's players, and they'll line up against each other at a face-off, and they'll go, hey, you want to go? You want to go? Should we go? Yeah, do you want to go? So again, they know it's coming.
Yeah, and
both people are willing for it.
Yeah, and they kind of choreograph it a little bit more. Like, not so much the way the fight actually goes, but kind of a different thread of conversation. I hate it that there's always gloves being dropped when a clean hit is made in the NHL nowadays. Like,
yeah, I know.
There does come a point.
Hit, just leave it.
Yeah, and the problem is,
what you mean. Like, I watched some hits.
Yeah.
I was watching some just because I wanted to watch some ice hockey hits.
Yeah.
The other day, and I was like, it's a perfectly good hit. It's not against the numbers or anything, and it's just a big hit. And they go, "No, we're going to fight you now." And I'm like, "Nah, come on, it was a good hit."
Yeah, it's just like it's
9 times out of 10, the player just bounces straight back up.
Exactly.
They saw them coming, they're fine.
Or they try to do a bit. Down. Yeah, they try to do a bit of embellishment and kind of get a call from the ref afterwards or something.
Yes, but I think like you say, there's a place for it. Half the time they're willing, as you said. There's the code. They stop when they go down, but. It's better to let them sort it out themselves than just have the game go into complete disarray.
Yes.
And obviously that's why the linesmen stay out of the way until they finish, because the linesmen don't want to get a fist to the face.
Although like the way that fighting has gone nowadays, it's very much more pushing and shoving than it is actually throwing punches for the most part anyway. It's more of like a wrestling match.
I remember I was listening to something, it might have even been this morning against the for the Nottingham-Sheffield thing. And he said that, yes, okay, in the NHL, when you've got the really big, tough guys, it hurts. But it's different to a street fight because the punches aren't as hard because you're trying to balance on skates as well and you're doing these pirouette things and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So, it looks hard and obviously it strikes them off balance more because they're on thin blades on ice.
Yeah.
But it's not perhaps as aggressive and violent. Yes, in some cases it is, but it's not perhaps as aggressive and violent as it may well be for a lot of people. Because normally, and I'm not a fighter, as you can tell, but normally, obviously, you kind of go lean forward with your punch.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're doing that on ice skates,
you're going to fall over
underneath you. So half of it is kind of keeping yourself balanced. But yeah, there's a place for it. I think it was just an interesting conversation because it was the 20-year anniversary of that brawl, which is the most infamous brawl in UK hockey. And I was too young and hadn't started. I mean, I was 5 at that point. I was too young and hadn't started following ice hockey then. But, there's people who were there that I've spoken to, and they just go, it was just insane and incredible, and you couldn't follow it really. But so I was just interested to get your thoughts on fighting, and again in the comments section let us know what your thoughts on fighting are.
Absolutely. Just kind of to sum that up, I don't think it'll ever be taken out of the game because the league would have to get approval from the players, and I don't think the players ever want it taken out. I feel like it would come down to them, the players, deciding, you know what, I don't think it's a necessary part of the game anymore. And I think the players like the fact that if a nasty hit is made against them or one of their teammates, they will have somebody that will stand up for them, regardless of whether they're a fighter or not, regardless of whether it's a heavyweight bout with loads of punches being thrown, or at least a drop gloves pushing and shoving match against the glass kind of thing, where maybe one punch is thrown in the entire thing, and it's kind of who can flip the person on their back first, I feel like the league is never going to take it out outright because the players won't be happy about it, and there'll be some sort of repercussions for it on the players' perspective. And I don't think the players will ever ask for it to be taken out. Obviously, we've seen it decline over the last few years, and it's kind of that. I feel like that's the way it's going to kind of go now. It's going to kind of sit that way. But, this is a conversation we could sit here and have for an entire podcast episode.
We could.
So I feel like we should leave that one there. But like Chris mentioned, let us know your thoughts about fighting in the comments on YouTube as you're watching this. We'd love to hear what you guys think.